Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and because it is now October, this week I watched Hocus Pocus from 1993. Now, if you have gotten here because Hocus Pocus 2 has come out, I didn't know that was happening. I found out after the fact when I went looking up information about this movie. I have no prior knowledge really of Hocus Pocus other than GIFs and images that people throw around the internet from time to time. I have no personal attachment to it and haven't seen it before, as is usually the case with most of these movies. It came up because it's just one of those things that's like a classic or a cult classic that ends up coming up in conversation. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. It is October. It's that time. So time to watch Halloween flavored things. This is an interesting film. No, I take that back. This is not an interesting film. I am confused by this film. It is a cult classic to a lot of people, and I can understand why from a marketing perspective, but not from an actual film quality or production perspective. Apparently, this movie did very badly at the box office, and then mostly has become a cult classic in later years as it was put in Halloween reruns on like Disney Channel and other Disney TV stations, and that's where apparently a lot of its status has come from. And I mean, first and foremost, I'm not really sure who this is for. Now, I didn't grow up with a lot of Disney stuff. I didn't grow up with cable. I didn't grow up with a lot of going to a lot of movies in general, and I didn't grow up watching a lot of Disney stuff in general. And so my exposure to this would have been extremely limited unless like a friend put it on or something like that. And nobody ever did. So it's kind of niche in the first place. But what confuses me most is I'm not sure who this is targeted at. Because to me, this has a lot of, despite being 1993, this has a lot of 80s flavor to it. And by that I mean it is structurally unsound and inappropriate for the age range it appears to be targeting. The movie is not particularly scary, but it has enough elements of it that are possibly slightly inappropriate or scary for kids that I don't think that I would think that I don't think this is appropriate for maybe a kid under 10. But I also feel like by the time a kid would be old enough to see this film, narratively it would have trouble keeping attention. It's not massively long, but for a kid under 10, 96 minutes is a long film, and especially when there isn't a lot of narrative substance and it's mostly about like sight gags and very surface level humor, that suggests to me that it is more oriented towards a younger audience. However, there are enough slightly too scary elements or jokes or even narrative beats that are specifically inappropriate to kids under not in their teens, I would probably say, that I don't totally understand who this is for, and I don't understand necessarily why people like it. That is not to say it is without its merits. The witches in the film, that being Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, are not bad. But they're not super compelling either. I will say the one thing that did really stick out to me is that despite Sarah Jessica Parker having a very weird character in the film, that like the three witches sort of play off each other in an interesting way. They've got enough like slightly it's some like they're not very deep, but they've got enough differences that they play off each other in kind of a fun way. But it really sticks out to me that Sarah Jessica Parker is Harley Quinn. I'm not going to even say seems to be Harley Quinn. I mean the late 90s like animated series Harley Quinn, which is like Harley Quinn was created as a character in 92 but didn't really get to be a fan favorite character until the animated series. And I would be hard pressed to believe that the animated character was not substantially influenced by Sarah Jessica Parker's portrayal of the witch, who is also named Sarah, by the way. That stuck out to me as bizarre. Her portrayal in here just is like prototype 1990s Harley Quinn. And that character has since influenced pretty much every other rendition of Harley Quinn, up until the current one in the DCU. And so I doubt anyone would admit it, and I don't really have the resources to dig into that unless somebody's already admitted that is the case. But like that really stuck out to me as like that's just Harley Quinn the witch for some reason. But I digress. Bette Midler is pretty good in this. I enjoy that she seems to be chewing on the scenery at least as much as she is able to, given the strictness of the structure. There really isn't a lot of substantial anything going on in this film. The only really compelling element at all is the witches' portrayal and how they play off each other. Narratively, this reads like an 80s film. It is somewhat rebellious young male white teenager, in this case moving to a new town, as is the trope, acquiring a love interest who is unreasonably compliant, and also complicit in his misdeeds. And then the overarching narrative of whatever it is, to be perfectly honest, it's so insubstantial. It's left my mind in the 18 hours or whatever since I watched it. The arc of the grumpy young teen, his teen love interest, and his little sister who they're trying to save, I guess. It's so loose and the narrative is so nothing that the stakes are never particularly present. The whole thing feels very 80s in its structure, and in no way acknowledge this is a 90s enough film that I feel like it should be lampshading some of the tropes, but it's also a very young kids film, it seems like, so I guess they can't be asked to have a lot of cinematic substance or nuance in it, in the writing. So the core plot of the movie feels like a lot of other B, C, D grade movies from the 80s and 90s. And all the other production value, there are a couple of gags that I do actually find either weird enough to be funny or genuinely funny. But for the most part, it is very, very flat and surface level. Most of the comedy comes from overt, somebody said or did or looks a certain way, and that's the joke. There's no more to it. It's like, oh, isn't the thing she's wearing funny? Isn't the noise she made or the action she did, isn't that funny? The like the broom stealing scene is like the closest it gets to having a multi-layered joke throughout the whole thing. And I think that's a shame because there genuinely seem to be some amusing ideas that are just not paid off. The broom stealing and replacement scene is like a great idea and a gag that could be played multiple times in multiple different ways throughout the rest of the film, but they're just like, this happened and now they're doing this thing. And there is one slight payoff near the end and it is so minimal. It just feels disappointing. And I've said this again and again, like children's films don't get to say, oh, we're a kid's film, we can't be smart, because there are so many films that prove otherwise, that you can have smart and smart kids films that say meaningful things and aren't just, flashy lights to keep the children distracted and quiet for an hour and a half. And this movie isn't quite at that point where it's nothing but flashing lights, but it kind of is. Production values all around are very poor. Like, I'm not going to... The best thing there is the costumes, and that wavers a little bit. Also completely weird, Sarah Jessica Parker's character is wearing like a corset thing, and there are multiple scenes, one in particular where she's just really giving full cleavage to the camera in a way that feels like it was maybe I can't even the best I can speculate is it was there for dads who are taking their kids to the movie or something. It's just weird. It's why are you shooting this like this so we're looking straight down her top? It's just so weird. What was I talking about? Oh, the production values. The green screening is terrible. The effects are almost universally terrible. There was one practical effect that I actually did really like, where they have like rattling floorboards and they're trying to present this otherworldly effect from like underneath a floor, and I thought that was really cool and well executed. And every other effect in the film is terrible. There's a talking cat, and no surprise for a 90s movie, the talking cat looks terrible. Now, it's not the worst talking animal I've seen by a wide margin. The 80s and 90s is full of talking animals in movies, and they're all trash. This one is either mostly or completely CG, and it looks rough. No play on words intended. It's real. It's not like truly ugly, but you do get that sort of like uncanny valley, unsettling feeling from it for sure. And just across the board, there's a lot of very like the flying is they're flying, but they're moving slowly because this is the speed that the wiring rig could do. It's just the whole thing it feels very unimpactful, and the production values in order to do what they seemingly narratively wanted to do is just not there, and really again points towards a younger audience that isn't going to be as critical or care as much. I want to like it, and it's got some redeeming qualities, but ultimately it just doesn't do a lot with what it has, and it doesn't have a lot to do. The framing device as well is completely unnecessary. Like the beginning and end of the film are sort of bookended with this narrative from when the witches were originally executed in Salem. Of course, it's set in Salem. And it's completely unnecessary. And also one of the more inappropriate things for children. Starting a movie with an execution by hanging is probably not a great thing. And even though it's not shown overtly, the kids are going to ask what just happened if they don't understand. And then some poor parent is going to have to explain hanging witches to their 6, 7, 8-year-old. I don't know. It's just weird. There's some musical stuff that is largely kind of bad. The director, I originally thought this was a slightly later film, and it might have been a direct. As I was watching it, I'm like, this is based on the production value. This has got to be a direct to TV thing that Disney made at some point, right? And no, like I said, it ran on Disney TV later, but the director, whose name I recognized but couldn't figure out what from, Kenny Ortega, is mostly produced made for TV movies for Disney, and some like TV musicals and adaptations and stuff. I believe he also did what's it called? High School Musical, and a few of those other same things from that era. So yeah, the production wise and direction wise, the low quality does not surprise me. I wish I could figure out what I recognize. If a digression here, it's probably just me thinking Kenny Omega, who's a wrestler. Anyway, that's the digression for another time. I could talk about wrestling a different time. Hocus Pocus is kind of bad. I don't really understand why it's a classic or why people like it so much. But I could understand why you might just want to dress up as one of the witches. That does seem kind of fun. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been your host, the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys next time.